am the Lord of Deadside, Shadowborn at the confluence of worlds to walk between.
Carl here from Games, Brains and Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for short. And it's Let's Talk, as I'm going to be talking you through my experience of the hardest difficulty, new difficulty that's been added to the Shadow Man Remastering, available on consoles right now. It is different, to say the least. If you're used to that game in the same way that I was, it is going to test you in impressive ways.
Nettie was right. They are definitely Dark Souls. Dark Souls are mine.
And before we get into that, just a quick recap, in case you don't know. Shadow Man is based on the Shadow Man comic book series published by Valiant Comics and was an action-adventure game developed and published by Acclaim. Remember Acclaim? Released 1999 on PC, PlayStation, Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast. I played it on all of those consoles back in the day. Best version, Dreamcast. Outside of the PC, obviously. Then we got a remastered edition by Night Dive Studios, seeing the light of day in early 2021 on PC before arriving on modern consoles in January 2022. A remaster that did everything possible to improve upon the original. A list that includes 4K resolution, improved shadow mapping, per pixel lighting, anti-aliasing, and missing content put back in. It really is one of the most impressive examples of a remaster without it straying into remake territories. It is not a remake. Of course, this isn't a review of the complete game, though we already did that. And you can go read that on the website or watch the video review on this channel. Instead, I want to talk about its most recent update, at least for consoles. I think it's been out a lot longer on Steam. In particular, with this update, the new mode difficulty setting that is the horror. A very unexpected update to the game that went a lot further than just adding a new difficulty. That was a real surprise to me. Not only fixing and improving upon many minor issues, it also added additional content that makes the game easier to navigate in places, gives you a new weapon, new enemies, a new boss, new secrets, and for all you achievement hunters, new achievements. If you thought you'd save the world, think again. The horror bloody awaits.
You gotta be goddamn kidding.
Your failure will bring a splitting of the world.
Jesus.
Let us go. Drawn by the challenge of the knife of blood.
Fuck.
Drawn to death.
Oh, shit.
So what can you expect with re-entering the horror? Firstly, goes without saying, expect to be challenged in a way that you've never been before in Shadow Man. There is no breezing through this game anymore. You will die a lot. Not only does the Shadow Man take double the damage, but there are more enemies, more traps, and the obstacles are faster moving now. If all of that doesn't sound difficult enough, enemies will also no longer drop life force, their health, for you to pick up. That was a real shock to me when I started playing. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm just going to be getting it from the jars. Ooh, that's going to be interesting. But yeah, dying more times than I've ever died in Shadow Man. By the end, it was quite hilarious how often I was dying. Then, when you reach Shadow level 5, enemies get more health and take less damage from the Shadow Gun, which already deals less damage overall to begin with. What it forces players to do is be reliant on voodoo weapons. Now, I want to talk about that specifically. I've played Shadow Man a lot of times over the years. It's one of my favourite games. I have tattoos on my body of it. That is Jaunty, for those who never noticed before. And I've always kind of played it without being too reliant on voodoo weapons. I've kind of just left them for what they're being more as tools rather than weapons, you know? And relied heavily on the Shadow Gun. Here, I realised I couldn't get away with that. The Shadow Gun is heavily underpowered, so I was having to utilise more voodoo weapons, particularly the new one. When you find that becomes heavily a reliant thing. Both hands weapons, and then picking and choosing which voodoo weapons would be the most useful. Some are more useful than others, and so on. It was a real surprise to me and a really unique way for me to play it, as at times it made it easier, at times it made it more frustrating. Maybe you play it all the time with voodoo weapons in that start. I really didn't. But we're not done yet, because if you think it sounds hard enough already, I have to add, enemies are more aggressive, have extra attacks and actions, which again is a really cool thing, but worst of all, they no longer recoil from attacks. And nowhere is that more prevalent than when battling one of those damn chainsaw-wielding foes inside Asylum. Fighting multiple of them is a guaranteed death. One alone is hard, and you're constantly finding a place where you can stand out of reach to shoot them. Multiple, consider it. It forces you to be defensive. There is no brute forcing your way through this game now. Any single enemy has the capability to kill you on their own, and they will, a lot. Which is why taking your time in an area to clear out all the enemies is key to beating the horror, as enemies only respawn if you leave the level. So go there, clear out all your enemies, collect everything possible before moving on, check every corner. And I think if you're not convinced about doing that, when you go to the temples, that will be the experience that convinces you to play this way. As the sisters, you know, the sisters awake, those girls are some of the most frustrating fights you will have in this difficulty. Because bear in mind, they come in groups. They appear in groups, and you've got variations now where you've got the ones that single fire and explode if you dodge it, but you've got the ones that bounce. Imagine a group of them, and that's what the game will throw at you. You will die more times at the temples, particularly as, bear in mind I already said, increased traps and faster moving. When you first get to the temples and see what's changed, you'll be a bit whoa. And like the spiky things that are spinning around, they can kill you on one, just splatter you completely. So defensive is absolutely key. Shooting back and behind doors, killing something, letting yourself die. Because remember as well, with enemies, you respawn at the last place, so where the teddy bear activated you, where you went in, but the enemy's damage still remains. You did what the damage you did to the enemy still remains, so you go back there and you can continue, and that's how you got to play. Very defensive, very different, but not overtly frustrating, because you do feel like you're progressing as you start to clear out enemies and get a bit more freedom to move around the level. What is also key is not to try to do everything in the game. You don't need every soul or weapon to get to the end boss. You need 95 out of the 120 Dark Souls available and all 5 retractors. However, this is my advice. While it isn't necessary, getting enough calo to increase your health and getting both Violators is advised. The horror caps Violator ammo at 250, even with both guns. So to get the full 999, you need to get all the ammo upgrades from the playrooms, done by collecting the accumulators that are hidden within the 5 serial killer levels. Having the Violators with max ammo will make all the boss battles a lot easier, especially as these are some of the hardest parts of the game. You would know that already. I'm sure you're thinking, yeah, my god, the bosses. But they are, on the horror, easily the hardest part of the game. The horror forces you to play the game differently, and that is no bad thing, especially for those who've become pros at it. Well, while the Shadow Gun is still an important weapon, although I've run it down a bit, it's still an important weapon. Those voodoo weapons are more important than ever, but there's the new one that's remodeled on a skull, or modelled on a skull of a true form. This can be picked up very early on in the experimentation rooms, and I think will become a key tool for many players. It was for me. In addition, Whereas most of the secret cheats don't change gameplay, there is one that allows you to use life-side weapons in Deadside and is well worth utilising. Turn that cheat on, particularly as you pick up life-side weapons by exploring the 5 serial killers' locations. Some bosses, in particular the final boss and Jack, are bullet sponges, and you might run out of ammo in your Violator before he goes down, so having the option to switch to a submachine gun or a shotgun is really, really helpful.
Ammo's all gone.
Go back to the bosses though. Do not attempt to take on the 5, Yort, or the new boss, the Seraph Queen, too early. All will need to be beaten if you're going to finish the horror. Although technically you can avoid Yort, but you won't be able to access the Shadow altars. And you kind of want to be your strongest and with the greatest number of weapons possible. And of course, all bosses have their own unique challenge, so pick and choose who to face first. Now I'm going to give you some advice on this. Oddly, Brrraaains is probably the easiest to deal with first, as his attacks can be easily avoided. Whereas Marco Cruz is a nightmare because his bullets ricochet, and, as already said, Jack is a bullet sponge and his location is now darker. It is here that Shadow Man's quick save and quick load options become key. Utilise them really careful. Do not accidentally do a quick save right before you die. You know the thing I said about the enemies? If you die and respawn, the damage you did on enemies remains. That does not apply to bosses. Don't make that mistake. I did. I spent an hour at Marco Cruz thinking, why the fuck have I not killed him? And it was because every time I respawned and ran back, he was just going back to full health. I thought the damage I did was remaining. So eventually when I stopped doing it and then just focused all my energy, I actually left, went and got myself more powerful, got a Violator, and then when I beat him, it was a lot easier. Tell you what though, the sense of satisfaction that comes with completing the horror is immense. Even though I do think at times, particularly earlier on, its challenges might seem a bit too much for some. It is extremely tough. I don't think that can't be understated. And I think it can also be extremely frustrating, particularly when you're dealing with loads of the sisters or several enemies clustered behind a door, the ones that shoot machine guns at you and so on. But I don't think it's unfair. Aside from some new trap areas, actually, I'm going to throw that in. Some of them are just absurdly stupid. But, like me, if you wanted a reason to go back and play the game again, we now have a new one, this new difficulty, the horror. We embrace it. It is a unique way to play Shadow Man. If like me, and I'm going to keep doing that reference, if like me, because I've played this game to death over the decades, you love this game and you really want to experience it again, particularly, you know, if you're after new achievements as well. Not only has said all those improvements, the new boss, the new location, shortcuts and stuff that create different pathways, all really interesting to find too. But this will challenge you. And that was really exciting. But it is more than possible. It's not impossible. It's called the horror. It is an insane difficulty setting. But it's not impossible. Just consider it a challenge. This is my advice. These are my points and what I think you will experience throughout it. You probably have your own tricks as well you pick up. I didn't throw in movement. Standing still. Never stand still. Use the lock-on feature. But don't do the one where you have to turn it on and off. That will make your life a lot easier, as it will jump between enemies as you kill them, particularly when you're fighting multiple. That was something that made it a lot easier for me too. I probably did more jumping and rolling when fighting enemies in this mode than I've ever done before in a Shadow Man game. That's what I kind of smile about now, that it forced me to play it in such a unique way. But man, was I satisfied when I finished it. Have you got any thoughts on it? Have you played it and you kind of feel different and think it was a terrible idea and hate it, or like me, you find it really enjoyable? Or have you got your own tricks and tips? You know what to do. Let me know in the comments.
My God, the lad's got him bloody done it. Looks like you owe me that drink, Michael.
I am the Lord of Deadside, walker between the worlds, immortal voodoo warrior. As a god, I stamp upon the writhing face of the Deadside serpent. Weapon in my hand, the arcing death blow. The horror, I embrace it.
Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?